A all new episode of Talking Game of Thrones. I am one of your hosts, Kente, all the way live from Los Angeles, California, and I'm joined by my wonderful, talented, and beautiful co-host, the one and only Jen. How you doing, Jen?
Awesome. Very awesome. Especially very awesome after that episode.
Really? You enjoyed it? That's great.
I'm not sure if I enjoyed it as much as I think I did, or if the long wait just made me enjoy it that much more. That's very possible.
All right. So we're going to be talking about a lot of stuff with this episode. But first of all, this is our first time talking about this series. I've resisted many times to chat about Game of Thrones, and I finally said, you know what? It's time. You know, I knew this was going to be something that we're all going to be wanting to talk about, and I felt like this was time to do so. So I'm excited about this, and I'm looking forward to getting this conversation in. So there's so much to go. I mean, one thing I love about Game of Thrones is that they do such a beautiful job of giving you a lot of characters, right? There's a lot of characters. There's a lot of characters know and love. There's a lot of wonderful information that is out there. If you are a fan of the show, you can look up stuff and find out things. And so they do a great job with the way that they deal with their fan base, right? And you need a guide. You need a guide to follow Game of Thrones at times, right? So that's why that's one of the things that I love about this show. And this season, right before the season started, I was gonna watch like all the episodes again, right? But then I realized something. I just didn't have the time, right? So what I did was Screen Junkies actually has this great 50-minute recap of all 7 seasons. So it does a brilliant job of giving you everything that you need to get you there. So if you guys check it out, there's other as well that's not as long, but that one's pretty comprehensive and it gives you a lot of information. Okay, so I got that out the way. Let's talk about the episode. Tonight's episode was entitled Winterfell, and I didn't see anything listed of it until after the show had aired. I don't know why that needed to be a state secret, but okay, I guess they wanted to keep that mystery of what's the show. And it was directed by David Nutter, who, if you're an X-Files fan, he was one of the top, directors for the X-Files, and he's done a lot of stuff after that. And just about everybody was in this episode. Everybody that you want to see that are still left on the show. And the way that it started, this episode started, was very cool. And I'll kind of go to you first. What did you think about the opening?
Well, first of all, are we talking about the opening credits? Because I have to say, we actually rewound through the opening credits to watch them twice.
Mm-hmm. I'm talking about, let's start off with the credits and then the actual.
Because I feel like the opening credits were the people that I watched the show with said, oh, look, somebody gave them a bigger budget because the opening credits are way more intricate than that was actually really cool. But and there was some fun stuff in there. There was it's definitely world expansive. That's for sure. I think they touched on just about every single place in Westeros that we have ever been. Okay, so I'm actually going to sort of softball this back to you because I have a very specific understanding of the way that this season opened, this episode opened, and I before I say what I think was both good and maybe not so good about the way that it opened, I would like to hear from you whether you thought this was the opening that you were looking for?
Talking about the opening as far as the credits, or are we talking about?
No, now I'm talking about the actual narrative.
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, I was going to get into the narrative, but what I was referring to was, what did you just think about the magic? You know, like we'll get into the narrative part of it, but my thing was, what did you think about just, you know, the way it looked and the way it came, you know, and all of that kind of stuff. And then we'll get to
it's so sleek. I mean, the thing that I think sort of does the show credit is there's always something new and sort of interesting in the opening credits anyway, depending upon where they are and what they're doing. But there is also something always so sleek about just sort of the way that they open the show, period. And it's there's all the new facets to what's happening. There's the new sort of it's not a new piece of the ring, but but the ring definitely now is not showing us the same thing that it was before. And this is going to sound so funny. My son actually said it's almost as if they built the Westeros world out of Lego, and we are experiencing Lego Westeros. And so at first we were laughing, you know, oh, that's so funny. And then I thought, you know, actually that's a really good description of the way that this whole thing kind of came together. It's like the world in miniature is the only way that we can see how expansive Westeros is and how expansive it's become. Because it touched on basically every single part of Westeros that we've seen before, right?
yes.
So
Yes,
even places that we maybe didn't like all the important thematic elements of the show so far were basically touched on.
Yes. No, I thought it was pretty cool. I thought it was cool, and I love the now going from the opening credits to the opening scene with the soldiers marching into Winterfell. I just thought that was so awesome. I thought that was a very good. You know, it had that gravity, you know what I'm saying, that it needed, you know, of getting the season started. And we forget that this is the first time that these characters have been in the same space. So
right.
That's awesome.
And it did. It definitely felt like there was a lot of gravitas is probably a good word, but the weight of what was happening was clearly felt, but there is something that is that was kind of a contrast, right? Which is Winterfell is sort of this last bastion, and you feel whenever, well, at least I do, whenever I see the people of Winterfell, how less refined they feel, and in contrast, you have this army, which, you know, there's this. Obviously there's a uniformity to it, but it wasn't just in sort of the uniformness of the army. It was in the well kept nature of things, and what a juxtaposition that felt in terms of where they were going and how Winterfell always feels so provincial. Does that, you know what I'm saying?
Right. No, yeah, you're right.
So it always seems to me that that whenever Daenerys, whenever even Cersei is talking or thinking about Winterfell, they seem to either talk about it with a kind of dismissiveness, or they don't really understand how provincial it is. Like, it takes somebody from in the North to understand the North. And that, I think, was sort of a resonating theme throughout this entire episode.
Yes. No, definitely. Okay, so I understand that, you know, Jon Snow has a very different outlook of what they're up against. And most of the people that are there, who are a lot of them making decisions, they really don't have an idea of what they're up against.
That's right.
And that's why they're getting all this pushback, you know. So he still has that fight, you know, with his own people. Like, you know, we need to throw away all the petty stuff because, you know, these people ain't no joke. You know, it's not just an army, you know. And so he's on, he kind of feels like Roy Scheider in Jaws in a way, like
Right.
he's trying to tell people like, hey man, we got to close the park, so which is interesting. And then he comes back with the queen, Daenerys. I know is she your favorite character?
No.
Oh, okay. Well, she comes back.
Although I do love her.
Yeah, this is not one of my favorites. I used to like her, and then she got annoying. But we'll get into that in another time. But she's very arrogant. She's really arrogant, and she doesn't quite understand or care about you coming into this land, and she wants people to just fall to their knees and just be glad she's there, and she doesn't understand this politics, right?
Well, okay, so let's talk about that just for a quick second, because I think the reason that Daenerys doesn't understand what's happening in the North has everything to do with why Lyanna stood up and said, no, we voted you to be king in the North, or we made you king in the North, and her understanding of loyalty and how that stacks up as being free people already is different from Daenerys's so far conquest of most worlds, or most I don't know what I would call them, environments, populations, because there's always a nature of breaking shackles, of being the breaker of chains and things like that. She frees slaves and frees people from tyranny, but in the North there is no tyranny. Well, I mean, what little tyranny there was, it seems like Sansa and Arya probably stomped out already. And so in a lot of ways, because Daenerys is dealing with a completely different kind of population that doesn't, I think there's just a disconnect here. I don't think that it's Daenerys being so filled with hubris that she can't see what's going on. I think it's that she just absolutely doesn't understand this particular group. Well, group isn't a good word. She doesn't understand the North at all. And I don't feel like that's necessarily her being arrogant about it. I feel like that's actually not being like somebody failed. Tyrion failed, I think, in this respect, because I don't think that Tyrion, and again, God, so complicated. I completely understand why all of this stuff is happening. They are literally fighting the dead, and so for all the politics to be sort of coming in, it's a far cry right now. Bran is the one who says we don't have time for this. And I agree, they really don't have time for this. But this idea that somehow they have to make peace with their own politics when they don't even understand their own politics is in and of itself a huge issue, let alone the army that's marching toward them of the dead, right? Does that make sense?
No, it makes sense. I just don't agree. I think she's a jerk. But and we'll get back to her. But before, I wanted to get to this because I think we can handle this pretty quickly. Let's go to. I didn't think I would be talking about this. Okay, I'll say this. A good friend of mine, Chris Gray, he has a show called Beyond the Iron Throne, which will be on tomorrow night. They were talking about what's going to be like. They were trying to predict what was going to happen and stuff. And one of the prediction questions, I was like, we should try to predict who's going to get laid first. And score one for House Greyjoy because Euron finally got what he's been trying to get for a long time. So
which ironically was so funny, because Cersei saying, if you want a whore, go find yourself a whore, and yet at the same time her realizing that she actually can't accomplish this without him, And so finally giving in was sort of a little bit ironic, just a teeny bit.
Right. It was so funny. And even before that, when he was with Yara, and he said, "I keep you alive because I need someone to talk to because these guys are a bunch of mutes." It was hilarious. That guy is a great character.
Yeah.
He's a funny guy, and I can't wait to see him die.
He's so over the top in sort of like everything that he says and does that it's hard not to feel, something. He's not such a quote unquote bad character that you can't somehow relate in a strange way, but he's also so bad that you're just like, I mean, you cannot possibly be rooting for him.
Well, as an uncle, I would say that he is a terrible uncle.
Indeed.
So, one of the worst uncles I've ever heard of. But funny dude, terrible uncle. And going to the Greyjoys, we had score one for Theon as well, saving Yara, and unfortunately getting that headbutt. But
no, you know what? I feel like that was the best thing in the world that Yara could have done, because it basically says, okay, this is it now. I know that you're my level now. See, I like you enough to just headbutt you and pick you back up again.
Okay, so if God forbid you did something nice for me and I headbutt you, I don't think you'll see that as some kind of a good thing there.
No, but I am not from the Iron Islands, and so I am definitely much more of a boy. I think I'm from Dawn. I'll go with that.
Okay.
Yeah, I like my soft, happy living.
Well, kudos to Theon, because Theon, he's gone through so much. I've never seen a show with more dickless, like penis mutilated characters.
George Martin is sort of fond of that, isn't he?
I see. Yeah, it's like, how many times you're gonna keep doing that?
It's
George?
funny because we just had this conversation during the show about whether Theon was still Theon or whether he will always be Reek now.
Yeah, I mean, once they cut that off, I think you should change your name.
That's a big departure, of course, right? Theon's character in the book is quite a bit different from the character that we see in the series, so it's kind of cool.
Yeah, so that was cool to see Theon step it up, and I'm glad. One thing they do really well is they have so many wonderful characters and they give them moments. So Theon had his moment, it's like a bunch of characters had their moment. So let's go back to Winterfell, and the romance of Jon Snow and Daenerys. I mean, I could totally see this as a huge selling point for you if somebody lets you ride on a dragon. I can totally see you would be down with that. Or I can see if you had dragons, you would probably only date a man who could ride it too. But that scene was very good, and I thought it added to the wonder of the show. What did you think about that aspect of the show?
Well, I can't imagine that what we said in our living room has not been echoed throughout every other podcast that has basically been spoken so far. We all said the same thing. Oh, hey, look, it's the new audition for How to Train Your Dragon. Right. Which felt, but as much as tongue in cheek that sounds, there's a reason that is so powerful. And when I said to everybody, the reason that this feels really powerful to me is because Jon Snow, as a Targaryen, it's hard to remember all the little pieces that go into this, but Jon Snow as a Targaryen, the dragons allowing him to ride is not just about the dragons thinking, oh, look, mom and dad are together. It's really a moment like we saw in season 7, where there's clearly something sort of supernatural about what that bond sort of is. The dragons clearly understand. that Targaryen is Targaryen. That says something pretty major. It also, I feel like it also sets up something interesting for what may be to come. I mean, of course I don't know, but it does seem like that piece was important for us to understand that Jon can command dragons as well as Daenerys.
Mhm.
Because it did real, I mean, they went out of their way to give us that information. And I don't think that stare at the end by the dragon to Jon was, I'm looking at you because you're kissing Daenerys. I think it was something more. That's just my interpretation, but
I took it as he's just a creeper and wants to watch.
well, I mean, he is a dragon. It is, poor guy.
Mhm. Yeah, hopefully he never coughs around them and he might burn them by accident.
That would be truly tragic. Just
Right.
tragic.
All right. So with the obviously later in the episode he gets armed with the knowledge of his true origin and who he really is. And you know, how do you, based on, I mean, we didn't get a whole lot of how he's unpacking it, but based on what you've seen in this episode, how do you think this is going to play out as far as how he's concerned?
This is really tough because because eventually he's going to have to recognize that the truth is the truth. I mean, I feel like eventually that will get borne out. But it is really interesting to me that Jon Snow would rather believe that his father could never lie rather than believe something that is that say boy, how can I even say it? It's not that I think that Jon Snow doesn't believe Sam. I think he does believe Sam in some way. It's just how to reconcile what Sam says, and possibly Sam says it because his father and brother, he just found out that his father and brother had been, roasted by the dragons. Maybe that had something to sort of do with how Jon thinks about the information that's being brought in. But it was real interesting to think that Jon Snow's first thought is, Ned Stark would never lie to me. My dad would never lie to me. That felt very, it felt very Jon Snow, to be honest.
Yeah. And one thing it showed you too, you can have an asshole dick of a dad, but when you find out that he gets burnt to death, that's still tragic. So it still sees it as a tragedy.
And I mean that kind of revelation. There's a really deep meaning in there. That kind of revelation. It's not because I think that Sam understood that it wasn't just about his dad and his brother dying. It was about his dad and his brother dying. And like he said to Jon, you've pardoned people who have done you. You basically told all the wildlings, here's a second chance. Why is forgiveness okay in one situation and not okay in another? And I feel like that was sort of the core piece that Sam is sort of railing against. Because you're right. I mean, Sam's dad and that was just terrible. I can't imagine that Sam is, really shedding too many tears. Maybe that sounds harsh, but I feel like there's something deeper going on there too.
Yes.
I mean, when you think about it, Daenerys truly is heading down a road of of collecting economies, collecting. She is behaving in a way that a conqueror behaves, and every time conquerors go out to claim the world, whether they think they're entitled to it or not, oftentimes the mistake that they make is setting double standards or setting standards that are too difficult for people to live up to, and that creates tension and strife just underneath the surface, and that's where you get all of kind of the inner conflict. And I feel like they did a really good job setting that up as this is what Winterfell feels. Winterfell is not just a colony to be colonized. They are an actual independent presence that needs to be recognized Does that, you know what I'm saying?
No, yeah, it makes perfect sense. Yeah, and she doesn't I don't know. I mean, I guess you can blame it on how she was raised and her limited life experiences in diplomacy and how to treat people. But you know,
Well, maybe, but maybe there's something else going on, right? Maybe Daenerys sees all people as needing to be freed from the shackles of whatever, and doesn't, like I said before, doesn't understand that not everybody needs to be freed from something. That if you're going to ask people to be in alliance with you and acknowledge that you are queen of the seven kingdoms, then you have to make concessions that she's not willing to make right now, because I don't think that I don't think she understands that these people are already independent. They don't need her, except obviously in the war. But I mean, it's different. It is definitely different. There is no tyranny in the North. There is no one for them to be freed from.
right.
Right? It's not like in the city, it's not like in King's Landing, where Cersei is clearly not exactly the most benevolent of people. It's not like, she's freeing the Unsullied or any of that. This is all very different.
Yeah, very much different. We had several reunions and first time, seeing people in this episode.
Arya had several.
Yeah, Arya, the best was her and the Hound. That was pretty cool.
That was cool.
What did you think about that when he steps to her and said I think he said the line was, "You're a cold bitch," right? That's what he said.
Yeah. I first of all, I really love the way that character, the Arya's character, has been able to not just hold her own. And God, hats off to Maisie as a character, right? Because I mean, as an actress, because there is something amazing about that representation. In the very beginning, when Jon Snow is passing by, you can see viscerally on her face this sense of, I don't know whether it's doubt or whether it's like or whether there's something else there. I'll just say that. But when she meets with all of the other characters, oh my gosh, she cannot just hold her own. She is her own. Like, she is a force to be reckoned with.
Yeah, no, she is for such a small person. She definitely holds her own, and I really enjoyed that back and forth between them. They always, I always really appreciated that coming from her character.
I think the thing is that at this point, Arya has realized that it's not just that she needs to rely on herself to get whatever done that needs to be done. It's that Arya has realized that she is important herself. Like, there is something essential about who she is that is not defined by what other people can do for her or what she can do for other people. And that feels like a very full, rich sense. It feels like she is where Sansa kind of was when Sansa took her power back. And that's that actually is, to me, it's funny because I remember the George Martin quote about, well, how do you write strong women, or how are you so good at writing strong women? And basically he's just like, I write strong human beings instead of I write strong men or strong women. That really comes through in a lot of the characterizations that are happening right now between all of the female characters in A Game of Thrones. It feels very much like it doesn't matter whether they're female or male. What matters is that they can all hold their own.
Wait a minute, women are human beings?
Well, last I checked.
Okay. And just as a side note, Varys, poor guy. I mean, how many no balls jokes that he must have heard in his life, And that's one of the early scenes in the this episode is we get Tyrion, giving him another one. So
It is so funny that Tyrion is willing to not just make fun of him, but it is funny also that Tyrion that there is definitely some kind of inner joy that Tyrion gets from being not the one at the bottom of the totem pole, if you will.
I mean, I guess I understand. Being what he had to go through with his life, right?
Well, and also though, yeah, okay, let's just be honest, right? This part of why I think Daenerys has a hard time is because Tyrion sometimes can be, as her advisor, Tyrion can sometimes be personally a little less humble than I think Daenerys needs somebody to be around, right? Because Tyrion, as a Lannister, there's no way that you can't say that Tyrion doesn't have. I know he's been through a lot, but he projects himself with this kind of the same kind of arrogance that Daenerys does. It's different in scope, but it's the same hubris.
No, yeah. There's one more. There's a couple more things I want to get to, but let me. I'm gonna pull up an image so we can look. But I don't know. Can you see?
Yes.
That scene was that scene. Kind of remind me of. I don't know if you watched Dexter. Did you watch Dexter?
Yeah.
Do you remember like the first season?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it kind of remember. It turned out to, well, spoiler alert. It turned out to be his brother that was
right.
And remember how he would cut the bodies and stuff like that. It kind of He had that kind of thing going. What did you think about that scene? First of all, it starts off pretty funny.
Okay, so couple things, right?
He got blue eyes.
I've always had blue eyes. Yeah, that actually was pretty funny. One interesting aspect about this, which is obviously, I know everybody kind of notices, but it's actually interesting that there's been so much death and so much war and so much strife that now the young are leading the old. And that was another theme that was touched on at least twice in this episode, and I feel like it's kind of important. Because there is this sense that there is a lot of inexperience happening that may pave the way for some things to happen which may end up not being so great. But that poor what was his name? Lord begins with a U. Oh shoot. I'm sorry. I can see his name and I can't think of it. What's that? Lord you. There, yeah, right. Mm-hmm. Anyway, I'll get to it. But the idea of them having to kill that boy was big,
right?
I mean, I can't even imagine, right? And of course, to me, it's actually kind of funny that the person who doesn't see is the person who is able to kill him, because it sort of feels like anybody else might actually have a hard time with that.
Yeah.
The Lord of the Light does not discriminate, apparently.
Was he playing chicken, or was he really like was he really out of it, or was he just playing chicken the whole time waiting for his, because we never seen White Walkers do that, where they where they're like playing dead and then they come out like that.
Well, it may have taken a while for him to, I hate using the word turn, but that seems reasonable. I don't know if it was strategic, if that's what you're thinking.
Yeah.
I don't know. I didn't get a good sense of that.
Oh, okay. Great scene. The fans are gonna kill me. The guy on the screen, his name? The Red Bear.
Yeah, not Mance.
No, Lance Raider.
Yes, I know. I know. He's a wildling.
Yeah, don't worry.
My names are all out the window tonight. I was so excited to see so many things that, honestly, somebody, when we were watching, asked me something very simple, and I couldn't come up with the name because I had so much new stuff happening in my brain. So yeah, I apologize too. That'll come to me too. The moment that we end the podcast, I'll go, oh my God, I know everybody's name.
No, that's all good. Now, this is something that, it didn't even occur to me. It didn't occur to me until he comes to Winterfell, Jaime Lannister. I'm like, wait a minute, he pushed Bran out the window.
Yep.
Yeah, like talking about chickens coming home to roost. And because I don't know if it was ever said out loud that that's what happened. I think it was, if I remember correctly, did they really know that Jaime did that?
Did who know that Jaime did it?
I'm talking about the parties like Jon Snow and Arya and all those Sansa and all of that.
So, okay, so
he knows that he got pushed out of the window by
right, and in the beginning, part of the comedy of errors is that they capture Tyrion because Catelyn Stark thinks that it was Tyrion because of the dagger that was found.
Right.
And that was the attempt on his life. But in terms of who pushed him out the window, I don't think anybody actually really. I don't think anybody knows. Not anybody of consequence. Certainly, it wouldn't have gotten back to Jaime.
Right. So yeah.
Although everybody knew that he was alive.
I love the scene though. Where he gets there and he's like, and then he sees him. He's like, oh shit. Obviously, he didn't know he was alive, right?
Not that I would have. I mean, I wouldn't have been able to guess that Jaime Lannister knew that he was still alive. I mean, when you think about it, Bran almost died and did die so many times because he got pushed out the window, because there was the assassination attempt, because there was the whole thing with Theon, and I mean, unless somebody had specifically set out with that information to tell him, it would be difficult, I think, for him to know. Who else would have known that could have told Jaime?
Right. So that's our big oh shit moment at the end is when and the cool thing is if you look, the one reason why I asked you what you think about the first scene in the episode, it was a tie-in to the pilot.
Right.
And so the final scene in this episode is a tie-in to the pilot as well, but in a different. That's the whole point I was getting at. Was that's so cool how they bookended it with they give you a scene that was reminiscent of the pilot, and then they the big thing that was like the big oh shit moment in the pilot was when he gets pushed out the window. So and it was so long ago you forget about it happening.
So kind of like winter is coming is sort of the trope. It also feels to me like this season is sort of all roads lead to Winterfell.
Right.
Whether metaphorically or just logistically.
Right. So I just thought that was pretty cool.
Can I ask you, what did you think actually of okay, so a couple things. First, just as a shout out, because I just thought it was so adorable. Arya trying to flirt was just so, oh my gosh. It was such awkward, awesome. I just loved it. Only she could command that, I swear. But what did you think of okay, well, I guess a couple of things. What did you think of Theon's choice to go back to Winterfell?
I think he knew that what he did was wrong. So I feel like this is him making amends. You
Yeah,
know,
do you think that's what it's about? I'm not sure if I think that that's what it's about.
what do you think it's about then?
Okay, so and then this is just in the series, right? Because in the books, it's a bit different, but in the series, it really feels to me like Theon has been at the mercy of the wind instead of commanding it in terms of his own fate and who he is loyal to. He's been forced to be loyal to people. He's done things in the name of loyalty because he thought that was what was expected of him. He has created sort of challenges for himself that didn't need to be there, but then he had to sort of get through them in order to move on to whatever was next. And I don't think that this is about redemption for Theon. I think it's about him understanding that some things are bigger than himself, that loyalty and the ability to move on that loyalty is more important than just who he is. And I don't mean just who he is, what house he represents, what he said clearly, you're my queen, wherever you ask me to go, that's where I'll go. But it was really obvious when she said that you want to go back to Winterfell, that you could almost feel from the screen that his loyalty, it's not with Jon Snow, it's not with Sansa, it's with something else. It's something that Ned Stark started all those years ago,
Hmm.
which is bringing his kids, or the kids that were there, together in this sense of the North is so important, and it's your identity. This is how you become bigger than yourself.
And also, I mean, I guess, or you could be overthinking it. I don't know.
Well, as with many things, Game of Thrones, it is very easy, I think, to overthink some of the simpler storylines, but also because there is such a complicated dance of characters, alliances, and storylines, it also never feels like any of these ideas are necessarily out of place, because they all feel because it is so expansive. I mean, about the only thing that wouldn't make sense right now is, maybe a new army arises and Deus Ex Machina wipes out everybody.
Uh,
Or, global warming happens and all of a sudden the White Walkers don't exist anymore. Something like that.
well, let's hope that's not how it's resolved. I don't think so.
That wouldn't be very satisfactory, no.
No. Um. Okay, so can I go back in time?
You can try.
Okay, so do you see what's on the screen?
Yes.
You know what that is?
It's small, so I'm not 100% sure.
Okay, are you on your phone?
Yeah, unfortunately.
Okay, it's the ice dragon.
Oh, it's the ice dragon. Okay. Yeah,
So
now I can see it.
now I know you're not on the board of tourism of Westeros,
Well,
but
not today. They turned down my application. Sorry.
maybe I need to look at that map again to see exactly how far the wall is from
Winterfell?
Phil. Yeah,
It's a good distance. It's a good distance because we know that Jon Snow, Ned Stark, and I think Tyrion for the last leg. I mean, they had been traveling for quite some time before they got to the wall.
right.
So it's a while.
So, my question is the Night King, right? The Night King, he's on his caravan of love, and he is heading towards Winterfell. Um, so this is obviously the calm before the storm, right? Um, like, did you expect to see the Night King at all? I didn't.
No.
No. When do you think we'll get the Night King? I've heard that the third episode is like a big one. I don't know any details about it. I just know that it's supposed to be like one of those big Game of Thrones episodes that is, out of this world. So I'm thinking personally, this is just me, that we'll get maybe near the end of the episode, the beginning of the full-on attack. Which is cool, right? I mean, I didn't expect a whole lot as far as action-wise to happen in that episode. Next week's episode, I don't know if you saw it. It looks like it's like a trial or something of Jaime, and I'm hoping it's not some like that'll be boring. Like it kind of scared me. Like the preview kind of scared me. Like is next week's gonna be like a trial episode?
Okay, so I'm of a few minds about a lot of this stuff, and this is why I think that politics matters. It's first of all, I mean, you might as well have labeled this episode Revelations, because there were just Revelations and Homecoming. There were so many reunions that were actually revelations, like, oh my God, you're alive, or oh my God, I never expected to see you again, or oh my God, I can't believe you're here. For Jaime, obviously this is really complicated. And I personally, understanding what we understand about what's going to happen with Cersei's army says to me that if they don't put Jaime through some kind of trial by fire, no one's going to trust him.
Right.
So I feel like narratively, they need to do this. They need to figure out whether his loyalties are. I just said that before, right? The whole idea is everybody is sort of understanding where their loyalties are. But Jaime is one of those people who has switched sides so many times that it's hard to understand, or not switch sides, but appeared to be doing things on both sides for so long that I think that if they don't somehow narratively come to the conclusion, yes, Jaime is okay to be our ally, they never will. That would always sort of be hanging over things. And also I think it wouldn't make quite as much sense for him to be a part of anything, because why should anybody trust anything that he's doing?
I agree, but I don't want a whole episode of Jaime on trial.
Do you think it's a whole episode? I mean, they didn't even do that with the fight scene with Prince Oberyn.
I'm just saying, I hope that it's not half the episode either. Of
Also, let's face it, Bran is dead. For all intents and purposes, there is no Bran anymore. It's Bran, as we understand him in the flesh, is the three-eyed raven. There is no Bran. I mean, that's the whole point of Bran saying when Jon Snow said, "Oh my God, you're a man now," and Bran said, "Yes, something like that." That wasn't a mistake. That wasn't him saying tongue in cheek, "Yeah, no, I'm not quite that old." What he was saying was, "I'm not really a man. I'm something else, something you probably wouldn't understand." So yeah, a little bit of, okay, yeah, something like that. That is important to understand, because it would be difficult for them to convict Jaime of killing or trying to kill Bran, when I don't think that. I just feel like there's some other purpose in here other than putting Jaime on trial so that they could punish him. Like, justice doesn't seem to be quite that ridiculously built in minutia, not in this world. Do you know what I'm saying?
No, I hear what you're saying. I'm just saying, me personally, I just hope that it's not.
I so highly doubt, with the limited amount of time that they have, that they would put in anything even akin to a quote-unquote filler episode, or that there would be filler material inside of an episode. They have such a short window to get so much done.
No.
I have a lot of trust at this point in the writers, not just because they have produced something far more epic than I ever could have expected, but because even based on this last episode, I don't feel like any hair narratively was out of place. I mean, this episode felt like a piece of excellently sharpened steel. The edge is so fine on it that it's hard to find fault with. And I'm not saying that there aren't things that maybe could have been done or should have been done, but everything that did happen felt so purposeful and so well driven based on past events. So it doesn't feel to me like, oh, okay, well, next episode maybe we'll just have a whole bunch of superfluous information that everybody will just have to watch because we need a popcorn couple of moments. Like that just seems so far out of the expected that I don't think so.
We'll see. We shall see.
I'll bet you a cup of coffee.
Okay, you got it. I'm not saying that's what's gonna happen. I just don't want it to happen.
Yeah. Well, I don't think anybody does. I mean, I feel like the expectations are so high at this point.
Remember, Seinfeld and the X-Files both ended on a trial.
Yeah, somehow I doubt that is what's going to happen here, though. I just don't think so.
Okay.
Do we know at all whether George Martin knows how the series ends?
I'm pretty sure he has to know.
I mean, it seems like he would know, but I was curious if there had been any press about what his thoughts about it were.
He was talking as if he didn't really, really know, but I think he knows. I think he's just saying that.
Okay.
All right. So how can people get you on social media?
You can find me at followingbliss1 on Twitter, and you can join me on my websites at criticallaughs.com and moviesmakethemeal.com.
You can get me at Kente F on Twitter, and you can go to Instagram and get me at Kente Ferguson. That's KinteFergerson on Instagram, and of course our website is indyradio.org. That's INDYradio.org. We'll be back next week with an all new episode. You guys have a great week.